How's it going, guys? I'm ItFightsBack, and today I'm going to showcase what was my Ritual End of League project, which is a Bleed Kinetic Bolt Raider. I have min-maxed this build about to the limits that it can possibly achieve, and I'm going to showcase what it is to you here. So this project began when a stream viewer of mine mentioned that he believed the Siege cluster jewel that gives Kineticism, causing attack projectiles always to inflict bleed, maim, and knock back enemies, while as not piercing, forking, or chaining. He thought it might have been bugged with Kinetic Bolt because it seemed like the Kinetic Bolt still just kind of ripped through enemies as it went. So Kinetic Bolt fires a projectile from your wand that changes direction in a zigzag pattern at regular intervals or when hitting enemies. Each time it changes direction, a secondary projectile breaks off, flying in the direction that it changed away from. So what that looks like here is it fires a projectile, it kind of zigzags through the middle, but every time it changes direction, it fires just a little extra little burst off. And then I normally am using that with greater volley, so that like you can kind of clear speed. So, also on here, I have an anomalous Kinetic Bolt that allows increases in reduction to cast speed to apply to attack speed at 50% of their value. So with a Raider and all of the Onslaught scaling, that gives sort of double dipping on Onslaught to the Kinetic Bolt attack speed. Further, increases in reduction to spell damage also apply to attack damage from this skill at 200% of their value. So any spell damage that I'm able to get gives doubly for attack damage on Kinetic Bolt. It has a high effectiveness of added damage, so any flat fizz I'm getting really adds to it as well. It changes direction 8 times, and modifiers which would cause projectiles to fork instead cause them to change direction additional times. So Kinetic Bolt is not chaining, it's not forking, it's not piercing, it is changing directions, so it mitigates all of the downsides of using the Siege. So we figured that, okay, well, that gives you a 100% chance to bleed and maim with Kinetic Bolt if you use this. So you don't have to spec into all of the chance to bleed in order to make it work as a bleed build. So anybody who's ever played a bleed build knows that you need a weapon that is item level 83 or higher with Elder influence on it, so that you can get the 60% increased chance for bleeding inflicted with this weapon to deal 100% more damage, with enough attack speed that doubles your bleed damage, because bleeds overwrite lesser bleeds, so with enough attack speed, you will wind up hitting that 60% chance enough times that you will be doing double bleed damage. So this wand was not as easy to craft as I thought it would be. I figured we would just get the wand, we'd go farm a couple harvests, we'd get some physical chaos rolls, and we'd hit this pretty easily. So if I pull up here Crafter of Exile, and let me turn these back off. These are all the mods that you can roll on a wand. There's all the prefixes, suffixes, and with Elder influence, there's a bit more. So getting exactly the mod you want is not quite that easy. The big issue was we wanted physical damage percent, we wanted flat physical damage, which is way down here, and we want this bleed mod. Problem is there's a lot of extra physical mods here. You can get physical damage as chaos, there's an Elder mod that converts physical damage to chaos, there's flat physical damage as spells, which rolled a lot. It seemed like it has almost 4 times the chance to roll as the bleed mod. Same with this one here. And I actually have an 84 wand, so here, let me change that at the top. Let me change this to 84 instead of 83. So it winds up being 6 times the chance if you have an 84 or higher wand. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to instead use, like, you could also get physical plus the physical spell gems here. So the goal was to instead use fossils. You can use Jagged Fossils, that'll block anything that's chaos while giving a boost to anything that's physical. So that removes the physical as extra chaos, that removes the physical converted to chaos. But it also buffs the physical damage to spells. So it's still, it's like 11 times higher right now. If you're just using Jagged Fossils to get physical damage to spells, then you just get the bleed mod. So we have to go a little further. Of course, we would use Corroded Fossils because we want to remove all the elemental modifiers. You can see that just chucked off a ton more modifiers here. So the only remaining thing here is the caster mods. You can have a pretty high % chance to get spell damage, although it's kind of outweighed by the Jagged Fossils. But I still have a pretty high % chance to hit mana, which is going to hit anyways. Plus the physical spell skills, and plus the physical damage to spells. So we also need a Serrated Fossil. Serrated Fossil gives more attack modifiers, less caster modifiers. It's really the best we can do without throwing in Sanctified Fossils. It's going to lower this down to a 4,500 weight. So now with the Serrated Fossil, the bleed mod is finally a higher chance than the physical spells. So this is the method I use to craft my wand. And we'll go back and look at that. So I wanted as high flat fizz as possible. And then I would craft the % physical damage on. But I wound up hitting Tyrannical with the bleed. So I crafted flat fizz on this, and this is the best one that I've hit. So here I have two others. This one hit Tyrannical and a lower flat fizz than I could craft. And this one here hit the same flat fizz that I could craft, that I could then craft the % physical damage on. But that's not going to be better than Tyrannical because it's like 100 to 129. So if I pull up a PoE trade search here, this is any wand that has this bleed mod on it. That's all I searched for. Whether they're online, offline, this is what you get. This wand has T1 flat fizz, crafted physical modifier with the bleed mod. This is perfect. You could still reroll it for attack speed as a suffix by keeping the prefixes. He was asking 10x for this. I've spent like 20x trying to craft this wand and didn't anything better. This is like, but who's playing a bleed wand build? This one is better than mine. It has T2 flat fizz with the % fizz. This one here is better than mine. T2 flat fizz with a lower % fizz even. But this one here, this is not as good as my wand. My wand, so I have the 4th best possible wand that has existed in the league, and these guys stopped playing a bit ago. So it's pretty complicated to get the wand. I probably, yeah, like I said, spent 20x. I've hit some decent ones. I've hit a one that works. It does damage, but it's not cheap. So the rest of my gear here on my helmet, I got Helm Enchant, Kinetic Bolt, changes direction 2 additional times. I got nearby enemies take 9% increased physical damage, and the only other thing I could think here, because I'm going to be cutting so much life in this build, and since I have a shield, I can shield charge for Fortify. I thought, why not? Let's get increased Fortify effect to help keep ourselves alive longer. Then I crafted physical damage from hits taken as fire, so I can further protect myself from physical damage, because that's the weak part of a dodge build, usually. So this... I'll start with the amulet. This amulet here, I needed a ton of intelligence on, because the intelligence requirement for this wand is 188, which is pretty high. It's kind of hard to get that much intelligence, so I wanted as much intelligence as possible with flat physical 2 attacks and physical damage over time multiplier. I anointed Whispers of Doom for additional curse, which I have on both my rings. I'll show you in a second. And then I later augmented Caster to get spell damage, because spell damage double dips, so that's 14% increased kinetic bolt damage. So here, I kind of have a similar thing. I have vulnerability on hit on a steel ring, with much physical damage as I could get, that I awaken or orbed with a Shaper spell damage ring. So this has the T1 spell damage, and it has T1 first vulnerability on hit. I crafted Flat Fizz, don't need life. I'm already level 100. I didn't level this build. I converted it from a different build. So I don't care if I die, essentially. So this has 64% increased kinetic bolt damage. Right? So the other one has Despair on hits with as much Flat Fizz as I could get. And that is why I needed Whispers of Doom. So I could curse with Vulnerability and Despair. This one had Life Resists on it, and I put the minus total mana cost on here. It isn't necessarily needed because with some physical leeches mana, it's fine. But I also have minus 15 total mana cost on this chest. Now, this chest is something I purchased. I did not craft this chest myself. All I wanted at the time was chance getting further charge on hit that was 6 lint. And I might have needed the fire res. So I might have looked for that as well. So this is what I happened to find. I spent 20 exalts on this. Physical from hits taken as cold was really nice. The minus mana cost was nice. High life was nice. The open prefix to craft dodge spells was really nice. So I was originally using this chest here. Gives enemies you kill a chance to explode, physical damage. I'm scaling a lot of physical damage, so explode mod would be good. But I was also originally trying to use Venipuncture as one of my rings. So with this, it says it gives you a bunch of extra damage with bleed. It was an iron ring, so I wanted a corrupted one. Increases the aura effect of malevolence, which is good. You can chill enemies you inflict bleeding on, and bleeding enemies you kill with hits shatter. Well, I'm thinking, okay, that means enemies that I kill with bleeding will shatter, but you have to kill them with hits, not with the bleeding, so this actually didn't really work hardly at all. So I then ditched that for a Despair on hit ring. And then I wound up keeping this chest rather than going back to Exploding mod because I really liked the chest. I love the physical taking as cold. The minus mana cost is really neat as well. So moving on to the shield. The shield, I needed as much life and resist as possible. I needed chaos res. I didn't have chaos res anywhere else at the time. And I wanted as much spell damage as I could get because double dips for kinetic bolt damage. So this has 112 spell damage, which is 224% increased kinetic bolt damage. Boots here are Hunter Influence. There's only 2 physical mods that can hit on this, which are both on this. Chance to avoid bleeding, and bleeding inflicts deal 8 to 10% damage faster. Which it says they deal the same total damage but over a shorter duration. So it kind of shortens the duration while keeping the damage the same. So this was really easy to use harvest crafting for. Just chaos spamming with physical mods until I hit something good. Had lightning res, had high life, had mana, so I crafted movement speed on it. The belt here, I wanted an Elder belt that was a Stygian Vise. So I don't remember if I probably just purchased this. No, I didn't purchase this. I actually crafted this. So I might have influenced Stygian Vise myself or purchased the Elder one. But then I physical chaos spammed this, and it hit T1 Global Fizz with high life, and it also hit attack speed during the flask effect, as well as a decent resist, which was lightning that I converted to chaos with harvest crafting. Now this could have rolled projectile damage during flask effect as well, but I later found out that projectile damage doesn't scale my bleed damage, so it was nice that I stopped here with this one. The jewel in here has T1 flat physical 2 attacks and T1 flat physical 2 wand attacks, so as much physical damage as I could get out of this jewel. Gloves here, flat physical 2 attacks, life, cover the resists, physical damage leeches mana, which was nice but not needed. And the last thing I got on this was I got a augment physical mod to get the physical damage over time multiplier. Hit T2, but it's really nice gloves still. So that is my gear. My flasks, I have increased recovery rate, Eternal Life Flask Staunching. I like this better than Divine Life Flasks, especially for a dodge build where you're only going to get hit once. This will refill my life all the way. Quartz Flask of Warding. So this is my Cursamine Flask. I like to keep it on my dodge flask because when I have this up, I have... Oh, nope. Yeah. 66% chance to dodge attacks and spells, being a raider. I have a Granite Flask that removes poison, a Basalt Flask that gives me additional attack speed, and then an Alchemist of Adrenaline Flask for the most movement speed that I can get. This Granite Flask is being cut in half with Acro Phase Acro. But I wanted as much physical damage as I could get. I could probably put a Jade in here. It'd probably be more efficient overall. But I don't like dying to physical damage, especially with 4,400 life at level 100. So I just kept this granite in. Now, I was going to try and craft these gloves with just rolling fizz from Harvest, but I eventually found out that projectile attack damage is not scaling my bleed damage, so I wound up bypassing this. That also is when I ditch slower projectiles for Awakened Swift Affliction for a single target. I was using this ring here until I Awaken or Orbed the spell damage onto this. And then for quite a while, I was swapping this ring in for the Despair ring so that I could use Poacher's Mark. It seemed like it'd be better damage. It says 2281 DPS there, and now it says 19621. And Poacher's Mark adds 29 to 43 physical damage to hits against cursed enemies, lowers their physical damage reduction. It seemed better than Despair was what it was giving me. So we were using that for bosses for a while, but it turns out this is actually better. Well, I'll show you that in a little bit. So my gym links here in my chest. I have Anomalous Kinetic Bolt linked with Awakened Brutality. I have an Awakened Deadly Ailments, Awakened Unbound Ailments, Awakened Vicious Projectiles, and a Greater Volley with Awakened Swift Affliction swapped in for single target. Like, this is the best damage I can get out of this. So, you can't see, well, I guess I can in here. Offense, this bleeding damage per second from hits, 29,640 to 56, it says. So it's much higher than my 24,612 that this shows. But there's no, it doesn't show bleed duration in here at all. So in order to do that, I had to go to Path of Building, which I will show you in just a little bit. I'll put this GMP back in. So for the rest of the gym sockets, I have a Cast on Death portal here in my wand. Once you're level 100, I highly recommend this, especially if you're playing in a non-hardcore league, because you don't need experience anymore. You can cut life anywhere you want, spec damage through the roof. It's really nice. So up here, I have all my auras. I have Malevolence, a War Banner, which was greatly needed for accuracy. Flesh and Stone, which I keep in Sand Stance. If I swapped to Blood Stance, I could get increased damage from that, but I keep it in Sand Stance just for the potential damage mitigation. You take less damage from attacks at enemies that aren't nearby. So I'm like, as a projectile build like this, like I'm generally trying to stay away from enemies. So anything out there deals 11% less damage, which is really nice. And then I have a Divergent Vitality, which lets us really only here for 4% increased damage while I'm full life. It's only level 4. I didn't want to level it too much higher. There. Over here I have Shield Charge, Faster Attacks, Fortify. Being a raider, I got so much speed that you move pretty quickly with this. And then with the flask up for extra movement speed. I can move with that. Down here, I have my Poacher's Mark. I have a Vol Haste linked with increased duration. I use that mainly for bosses to kind of ramp up the bleeds really quickly. And then you have my Awakened Swift Affliction. Over here is my Second Wind setup with an Enduring Cry, Steel Skin, which is on my left click here. I had to drop these both to level 19 due to the amount of strength I had, but I wound up fixing that so they could level back up to 20. And then I have a Flame Dash here as well that I will swap. Like it's nice to have to move up and down ledges. And then I will swap that with my Shield Charge here for certain bosses like Sirus. Now there's some bosses that have lots of like invulnerability time, Sirus in particular. I'm going to show you a Sirus fight at the end of this video. So in the Sirus fight, I used Greater Volley. So whenever he gets out of that, you can kind of shotgun with this, and so you can ramp up your bleed stacks a little bit quicker this way. So you're doing less damage overall once you hit 8 bleed stacks if you were using the Awakened Swift Affliction. But then you have to like manually hit it 8 times rather than just being able to like fire 3 times and just kind of move and just like keep kind of firing as you move. It says here that here's my at the top. I'm doing 2.58 attacks per second. And I can't see the bleed damage anywhere in here, so now let me just go to the path building. We're in here in the calcs, I think. It shows, okay, it can show us bleed duration. So I have 2.58 attacks per second, 7.29 second bleed duration. And that factors in the damage rate modifier from like my boots and whatnot, and as well as skull effect duration. So if I pull up a calculator here, we do 2.58 times 7.29, which is my bleed duration. I can get off 18.8 hits if I'm continuously attacking before a bleed would wear off. But with Crimson Dance, you can only stack up to 8, which is why the bleed mod's important. So only 60% of these are doing 100% increased damage. So if I continuously attack an enemy, I hit roughly 11 rolls where the bleed damage is doing 100% increased damage, while I can only stack 8. So that guarantees, essentially, that I'm getting double damage from bleed with the 60% or 60% chance on that. So you want your attack speed to be enough that like this number is above 8, and using an imbued wand, you don't need much scaling there. So it shows here that I'm doing 1.18 million bleed DPS. That's with 8 stacks. That's with using Swift Affliction. Here, so if I'm using Greater Volley, it maxes out at 750,000. And yes, that is on Shaper Guardian or Sirus. Either, it doesn't matter. I always have Onslaught. I always have Phasing. I'm leeching when I'm attacking. That's at 8 bleed stacks. So if I only do 1 bleed stack, so like 1 hit on an enemy, maximum damage I can do is like just under 100,000 with Greater Volley and like 150 with Swift Affliction in. So you actually have to hit an enemy 5, 6, 7, 8, and all of those have to roll within the 60% in order to reach that 1.18 or whatever it was million DPS at 8 stacks, which is there, 1.18 million bleed DPS. So you have to continuously be attacking, and you have to get the rolls up there in order to hit this damage. So this damage isn't always what you have. This is your maximum damage potential with my min-maxed gear. and my min-max tree. So I was originally thinking, okay, we'll get all this projectile damage as it stacks, right? Well, projectile damage doesn't affect the bleed damage. So we wound up coming down here. I grab Primal Spirit because I need the intelligence. If I take that off, look, I'm under on intelligence here. I originally need it for strength as well. So we push down here. Like I said earlier, I did not level this build. I leveled this to 100 playing Caustic Arrow. I would never recommend leveling this build because it really kind of lacks a little bit in the damage department, even with my min-maxed gear. So I grabbed Wind Dancer. With as much dodge as a Raider gets, you don't really get hit often. So the 20% less damage taken, if you haven't been hit recently, is really nice, and it bumps up the evasion quite a bit. And then I got life here. Let me look at the Ascendancy here. Ascendancy here gives me permanent onslaught with a bunch of onslaught effect and evasion rating, and then more chance to evade melee and projectile attacks during onslaught, and just like bunch of onslaught effect. It's huge. So you just have super speed. This guarantees phasing, so you can run through enemies, and gives you attack and spell dodge. 15% is a lot. It's really, really, really nice. It makes this by far the best dodge class in the game. And then I get ailment immunity while phasing here. So I don't have to worry about like freeze, ignite, shock, sap, any of the other nonsense. So the big thing past Wind Dancer, Acro Phase Acro, was pushing down here for Crimson Dance. And then there's also these bleed nodes, which give damage over time multiplier for bleeding. Bleeding, you inflict deals damage faster here. So right here, I put an Intuitive Leap because it seemed kind of like a lot of points to go down here to get this node. It gives you bleeding deals damage faster, you get bleeding duration, which is really nice, and you get damage over time multiplier. And then I also expect this in because 20% increased damage with bleeding. It's like a best 1-point node that I could get there. I don't need chance to cause bleeding, so this point would be wasted otherwise. And I expect Golem's Blood for the life and regen, though I don't have these two 5% nodes because I expect that elsewhere. I was originally getting Fury Bolts because I need the strength for one, because I need the accuracy second, and projectile damage should, like, when your skill has two tags, which your attack and projectile, you think your projectile would kind of scale the bleed damage, but it doesn't, which I understand with things like projectile attack hits deal up to 30% more damage. Like, this is purely like hits doing more damage. So not like projectile damage overall. So I found that kind of confusing because I was trying to use slower projectiles on bosses for so long until I switched to Swift Affliction, and I found out through Path of Building that these nodes don't really change my bleed damage at all. I did, however, find out these nodes did. These bow nodes that give you bleeding you inflict deals damage faster. You get 15% there. So like these bow nodes were required. This Ent node here is required. I got the Mana Leech here, which probably isn't necessarily needed because I still have it on my gloves. I was going to change the gloves like I mentioned. This accuracy is needed here. It's nice to get the all res to free up some gear. Jewel here has global physical damage over time multiplier, and life with increased total recovery from life leech. I'm not scaling my hits. That kind of really ramps up the life leech. Profane Chemistry are like my favorite nodes on the tree because they scale my Eternal Life Flask. 30% increased life recovery from flasks, like 50%. So 50% of 2500 is 1250. So that makes us like 3600 life roughly. With that flask. And where did my Path of Building go? So yeah, I really like these nodes, and you get increased flask effect from this node as well. So I pushed over here for the Silent Life Wheel, get Constitution, easily the best life node. I didn't fully fill it out because I just wanted to get the strength and physical damage here. And then I grabbed these two nodes for the accuracy more than anything else. My hit chance says 100%. Without it, it's 97. I want 100%. So that's the whole bottom side of the tree. Pushing through Herbalism. Herbalism also gives another 20% increased life recovery from flasks, increased flask recovery rate. So further boosting the Eternal Life Flask. So when you pair Herbalism with Profane Chemistry, it really scales well with the Eternal Life Flask over the Seething. Here I have attack speed with accuracy. Accuracy again, needed to get the hit chance up. I don't have any flat accuracy on my gear, so I need that. Acro, phase acro is 40 and 30% chance to dodge attacks and spells respectively. Now I'll go with the cluster jewels last. Originally I was pushing up through here and coming across, but I eventually found a way into Master of Force, which gives me the 30% strength that I was needing elsewhere. So it wound up being a little bit more efficient to push up here. Like, these are big physical damage nodes. It also gives an overwhelmed physical damage reduction, which is nice. So here I grab Will of Blades, which is physical damage. This is all damage over time, skill effect duration, and attack speed is good. The intelligence here. And then I have Blood Siphon, which more strength. It's like razor thin edge there. So as I push up here, I grab Blood Drinker for life, get Elusive for more dodge, speed. I come around the left side of Growth and Decay because I like this 1.8% life regen over the extra point for a 12% increased damage over time, and it saves me a point. This here I need for the intelligence. It also gives some damage as well, because my intelligence is not capped without it. For cluster jewels, use an 8 passive increased physical damage cluster jewel, which was extremely easy to roll. I actually rolled a couple of these. This one has 3 mods on it. This one has 3 mods on it. Like, these are rolled using a harvest craft that rolls. It's like a chaos that gives physical modifiers and increased chance at additional physical modifiers. It's really easy to hit 3 physical notables on this. So that's the route I went. I wound up going with the one I did because I like this node here. 5% chance to deal double damage. Probably not much, but hey, it's 5%. Exploit weakness is vulnerability curse effect. With this 25% vulnerability curse effect with vulnerability, 25% of 30 is like 7.5. So cursed enemies take another 7.5% physical damage with this, as well as 15% increased physical damage. Here is 35% physical damage and another 10% overwhelmed physical damage. Now, the other jewels, I wanted Rend plus Vivid Hues. Rend is bleed duration and damage over time multiplier for bleeding. I wanted this on both of them without a doubt. Rend is the most important because the longer the bleed duration, the longer you have to get up to 8 stacks that all include the additional damage. Vivid Hues gives you life leech against bleeding enemies and a damage over time multiplier for bleeding. And here I have a Watcher's Eye, which is 22% damage over time multiplier while affected by Malevolence. It's kind of mandatory, I think, for any damage over time build to have this. The movement speed while affected by Grace isn't necessary, but I really like this jewel in particular because when running heists, I run Grace on every single one of the heist members, so I get 15% movement speed when I run through heists. Here I got Rend, but I did not get Vivid Hues. I got Disorienting Wounds, which gives you increased damage, but it gives me a 25% chance to blind with hits against bleeding enemies, which I liked the idea of being able to blind enemies outside of the Flesh and Stone. And then here is the Siege unique cluster jewel from Delirium, and its Kineticism, which we went over at the beginning. So, that covers the tree. There's one more thing I want to go over in Path of Building, because there's other builds you could play this as for sure. The only question I've really received is why not use Deadeye? So, this Rupturing node gives critical strikes, which inflict bleeding, also inflicts rupture. Ruptured targets take 25% more damage from bleeding. Bleeding on them expires 25% more quickly. And you can inflict up to 3 ruptures on a target. So that's up to 75% more damage from bleeding, right? Which sounds amazing, but you have to have critical strike chance. My critical strike chance is 9.8. There is spots on the tree, you would get the critical strike chance inaccuracy here. There's critical strike chance on this node. There's critical strike chance here. You can get critical strike chance fairly easily, probably, on the wand suffix that really boosts the base crit chance. So there is room to play this build and get the crit to add in Rupture. The problem with Deadeye seems to be the other nodes. You would look at these and you're thinking, okay, Far Shot, that sounds amazing. Projectile attack hits deal 20% less damage to targets at the start of their movement, dealing up to 60% more damage to targets as the projectile travels further. Projectile attack hits. So it doesn't affect bleed damage at all. So if you want to play a Rupture build like this, Far Shot isn't scaling your bleed damage. Chain is kind of cool, but you can't chain when you're getting all of your bleed chance from the cluster jewel up here. Kineticism. So there's no chaining. 2 additional projectiles sounds fantastic. Then you could probably stick with using Swift Affliction all the time instead of swapping in a Greater Volley. Mirage Archer is a bow thing. So my thoughts here is if I wanted to do this, which, by the way, this has 10% increased projectile damage, which doesn't scale bleed damage. So you could get projectile damage here. Gathering Winds is probably a necessity, so you'd probably take this and this for sure. If you wanted to find a way to get endless munitions, cool. But if I were playing a Deadeye, I would get Rupturing. I'd get Focal Point, increased effective marks. And then I'd get Gathering Winds for the Tailwind effect. And then I'd get Wind Ward for less damage taken per Gale Force, which stacks your Tailwind effect. That's probably what I would do if I was playing this as a Deadeye. So that's a potential 75% more damage with critical, if you can reliably critical strike. Trickster, this is possible as well. You get 20% more damage here. You get increased skill effect duration. There's really nice recovery with Patient Reaper. Ghost Shroud's really nice. Reduce damage taken. And give you a bunch of evasion here. I don't think I'd go Trickster. I would go Deadeye before I went Trickster. On the other hand, though, I could see myself going Gladiator with a similar build. Gladiator gives you... enemy is maimed by you, take increased physical damage, which is good. And then you get 20% more damage with bleeding. Bleeding enemies you kill explode. So that's possibility is there. You're 100% maiming enemies. It gives you the chance to blind that I have on my cluster jewel. It gives you increased damage from maim. Extra physical damage here. You get Arena Challenger and still go dodge. This gives you a ton of speed. It might cause you to swap stances so that you can gain the Challenger charges during boss fights. And then I'd probably get Outmatch and Outlast for the buffs to Frenzy and Endurance charges. I don't really care about the chance on kill. because I'm getting frenzy charges from my chest, endurance charges from Enduring Cry. I can reach these max frenzy and endurance charges pretty easily, so that's more physical damage. So you can get the most potential damage all the time without having to spec into crit from Gladiator. Now you could like spec into shield and block and all that, but I think it's much easier just to go for acro, phase acro. The only thing they don't have, none of those other classes have ailment immunity, none of them have attack and spell dodge, none of them have a built-in way to gain phasing, none of them have a built-in way to gain onslaught. Several of them have ways to rival the speed. Gathering Winds, Tailwind buff, and the Challenger charges down here. That's a way to rival the speed of the Raider, but you cannot rival the dodge that the Raider has. So that is the build. Anything else you need to go over here? Right. Okay. So this ring here is one that I was speccing in for bosses because I have 24, 6, 12 damage. If I spec this in for Despair ring, I have 25, 471. So the damage tooltip goes up there because, of course, of the spell damage, right? And then I would cast Poacher's Mark, so I get all this extra fizz to cursed enemies, rather than use Despair on bosses. So, during the final parts of trying to figure out this passive tree, we routed this in path building up to here, right? And we were going to put an Unnatural Instinct in this. So this has a this small orange circle here. Hits all of these nodes here. That's a 9% movement speed that it would give you 30% accuracy. You'd get this attack speed. You'd get these 2 small life nodes. You'd get 6, 12, 18, 26% spell damage with the cast speed. 28% spell damage is 56% kinetic bolt damage. But it was when we put this Unnatural Instinct in here and saw that the spell damage is not raising the bleed DPS. That's when it's like, okay, we're done with this character. That's it. Because all of the spell damage stuff that we have just actually isn't working as we expected it to. And I think therein is the reason that I don't think the build feels super great. Because you would imagine with this amount of investment into this build would crush, right? I really can't say that it does. 1.18 million Shaper DPS with Awakened Swift, that's with 5 level 5 Awakened Gems. It doesn't feel good. And all of the I've got the steel rings, I've got the nearby enemies, got it all, right? It's like the damage just doesn't feel like it's there. As far as running maps, you can't run no reflect maps. Monsters have a chance to avoid poison, blind, and bleeding. That really sucks, so it's 50% of your hits actually do the damage. Cannot leech life from monsters or mana. Those are the mods that you cannot run on this build. 40% monster physical damage reduction. Increases the tankiness of the monsters, but I have a lot of Overwhelm on the tree. So this isn't really that. I wouldn't reroll this, I'd run it. It'd be fine, just more monster life. I'm going to run the city square map here and kind of show you the strengths and weaknesses of this build real quick. And then I will show you what it looks like in a boss fight as well. So this is a... where's this button? So this is a Valdo's Rest map down here. So it's going to have a big Harbinger in it. And the part I think this build struggles with the most is enemies that continually spawn when clearing maps. Because I can just pop through these enemies and leave them for the most part, and they'll die. See, they just kind of fall over after a while. Having played this, it feels like you really want to keep spamming down attack until the enemies die, which you really don't need to with bleed. But here the Baron mobs are like spawning in. I have to attack again. It feels like the enemies start dying. But things like ritual, like I didn't feel like this build held up super well in rituals, which I can show you. I'm only gonna do this one. I try to just position myself at an edge and throw down on them, but constantly spawning enemies, so you're not just like clearing out an area. So there was a ritual. Proximity shields suck. Alright, still haven't found this Harbinger. That's what I really want to see. So it clears the map fairly well. Not like I would already have been done with the map on my Caustic Arrow version of a Raider. And I mean I've spec'd that build to its limits as well. But all the way around, that feels better than this, and this is a much more harder thing to achieve, I believe. Okay, here is this. So I can inflict a lot of damage, and like I don't really take damage much. I can run through this if I really wanted. But these enemies keep continuously spawning. It just feels like they never die. Something else I really don't like about this is when hexproof enemies show up. When you have 2 curses on hit, like I do, with the Despair and Vulnerability, when a hexproof mob shows up, I should be able to cast my Poacher's Mark on it and not override it with the curse on hit. Because the Poacher's Mark can curse hexproof mobs. So like this is taking as long as the whole rest of the map did. Like fully min-max build. I'll mention it again. Like this is like if there's a way to push it farther, I don't see it. I don't know where it is. Maybe I don't need the 2 additional like direction changes. I could have gone for damage on the Helm enchant. But that's not going to change this. And before the Sirus fight, I'll explain how I think this can be improved. So here are the bosses. These bosses kind of fall over pretty easily, because it's really easy to like hit the max stacks on them. So like now they're taking some actual damage. The bleeds last quite a while, and they'll slowly die. So like the bleed does work. Like the difference between a map boss and your in-game bosses is quite different. So I picked up a few things here and dump all of this. Okay, so what I think the build feels like it's missing is what Wither adds to chaos damage over time builds. It's just missing that extra layer of DPS that you can put out on a single target. I don't know where that is in this build. Yes, I can swap this in, and then I can manually raise it to 8 charges with 8 individual hits, whereas the greater volley might only take a couple of hits to reach the 8 stacks. You won't have to spam it as much. So for something like an Elder or any of the Shaper Elder Guardians that you can continuously attack over and over, probably a single target would be better than the greater volley. But what is really missing is all this spell damage. Like this reads, increases and reductions to spell damage also apply to attack damage from this skill at 200% their value. Doesn't say attack hits, it says attack damage. And the flat physical damage that I'm doing with my attacks is what scales my bleeds. I don't understand why this spell damage is not factoring into the bleed damage. I think that's the thing that's missing. That is like the wither. Like I can drop wither totems in my caustic arrow build and just completely ramp the damage that I'm doing to a boss through the roof. So let's just think about how much, like if I were to put this ring in like I sometimes do for bosses, which I do in the Sirus fight, casting Poacher's Mark gives me extra flat fizz and lowers his fizz reduction. So that's 37% spell damage, 22%. Here's 32. Here's 7. Here's 112. I think I mentioned the 37 here. So if I pull calculator up, 32 from one ring plus 22 from the other ring plus 37 from the wand plus 7 from the amulet plus 112 from the shield times 2, that's 420% increased bleed damage that if we're there would make this build feel good. It would make gearing this build completely unique to any other thing that exists in the game, because the best in slot ring in the case for bleed is this steel ring with spell damage on it and a curse, which looks like an abomination, but like that is like the ring. So, and like I'm approaching this too from a perspective of bleed damage. There might be like reasons that the spell damage doesn't apply. Like it would apply to any attack hits. Like you're not getting more damage out of this any other way without like a better luck on the wand rolls. But essentially, like that's it. Like it's missing something. And if GGG were to change this to the so that this spell damage applied to the bleed damage to really kind of push the limits that the kinetic bolt can push with kineticism. Outside of this, I don't know what you use this for. I don't know what good this ever does. So I like it's here. The potential's here. I just wished it were a little better. I did kill Maven. I'd show you that fight, but it took 6 portals and like 17 minutes to do that. So yeah, like I actually used the single target for that, and yeah, that fight took an eternity. So I'll show you the last phase of Sirus. Um, I'll have other build guides. I'm going to put my Caustic Arrow back together. I'm going to show off my LA Crit Reeve Berserker. So if you'd like to see those, hit the subscribe button. Hitting the like button helps me out a lot. And enjoy the Sirus kill. Oh no, that's not good. Yo, that's a much better location. I got him. Okay. Goes Awaken Swift Affliction and some close.